Good to see you.
Mute, please. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another early growth webinar. Today, we're really excited to have an unbelievable panel with us today. We're going to take a few minutes as everyone starts to settle in and go through a few of the ground rules here. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Dato. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Early Growth. My entire career, though, has probably been more in your shoes than in these shoes I'm in now. Serial entrepreneur, I've been involved in half a dozen venture-backed companies, raised a decent amount of capital, returned a little bit more than that. And I'm coming to you today from Santa Monica, but I was born and raised on the East Coast and have lived all over the world. Today, our audience is coming to us from all over the world, so welcome from all corners. As you log in, please use the chat functionality. Make sure you're chatting not just to the panelists, but to all attendees, and introduce yourself. Give us your name of your company, a one-sentence description. If you want to share a link to your website, do that, and let us know where you're dialing in from. If you have questions for the panelists as we're going through this, use the Q&A functionality in Zoom as opposed to the chat. Hopefully the chat here, as we're all digital, well, I really miss the times when we were doing these events together, but hopefully the chat is an area for us to network. And so hopefully it's really noisy. Please use it, discuss as we're going through here. And every time we've done these, we've had connections that are made in the chat. So again, make sure you introduce yourself, and when you're chatting, make sure you're chatting to all attendees and not just the panelists. Last but not least, today's webinar will be recorded. We will share it with everyone via email. We post it on our website and on our YouTube channel. So let's kick off. A little bit about Early Growth for those of you that don't know. Early Growth takes care of the entire finance stack for early stage high growth companies. We've been doing this for a dozen years now. And as you start your companies and you build your companies, your focus tends to be on your customers, your product or service, and on building your team. But it's important to have a great team around you for some critical functions that can become big problems if you don't handle them, and can become key strategic advantages if you do get experts around you. And so we come at that from the finance angle. We do everything from the day-to-day bookkeeping and accounting, the month-to-month financial reporting, and your quarterly and annual strategic process, whether that's financial modeling or taking care of your taxes or a 409A valuation. We do this for startups around the world, primarily here in the US, but we represent companies in 40 different countries. And we also represent a lot of startup investors as well with their fund accounting. So I know today's topic is not just about founders, but it's about the investment community. And I saw in the registrations that we probably have about 25 investors joining us today. So we also represent investors. As I said, not our first rodeo. We've been around a while and have helped our companies raise a lot of capital and achieve their potential and their growth. And so you'll see some logos there that might be familiar, but we've had thousands and thousands of clients over the years that we've helped. We don't do these alone. We do these webinars with a great group of partners. And just as you're not building your businesses alone, as that's not a one-man band, having a great supporting cast of legal advisors and HR advisors and financiers is critical to success. So what I'm going to do here is today we've got FENWICK from the legal realm, Reverb from the HR realm, Silicon Valley Bank from the banking realm, Lighter Capital, which is an alternative finance channel. And then finally, we have Latinx VC. which is an organization that was founded by a bunch of Latinx VCs to try to improve the investing community and create opportunities for Latinx. What I'm going to do here now is stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to call upon some of our partners here to chat a little bit and give a quick little intro. So the first one here is John Prentice from Lighter Capital. John, your video and audio should be on, and would love to hear a little bit about what Lighter does.
Great. Yeah, thank you for having us. So Lighter Capital is a venture debt firm that works with mostly pre-Series A B2B SaaS companies in the US, Canada, and Australia. So we are global now. We're starting to launch into other countries. Give you an idea, we'll generally lend 3 to 4x MR levels, or call it a third or fourth of your annualized recurring revenue. So you do need to have revenue. But the big difference with us is we don't require equity sponsorship or investment to get a loan or a lending facility with us, unlike other lenders. So we're a really good option for companies that maybe want to delay an equity raise if you want to optimize for valuation or terms. We're also a close partner with Early Growth Financial Services and SVB, so excited to be here and happy to have follow-up conversations with any folks.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Yeah, Lighter, if you guys aren't familiar with it, you should check it out. It is a great alternative source of non-dilutive capital, especially if you have a recurring revenue model. And so as you're looking to grow your business and maximize the value of your equity, bringing in a partner like Lighter can really be advantageous. Next up, I'm going to call on Ryan McRobert from FENWICK and West. Ryan, your video and audio should be turned on.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Ryan McRobert from FENWICK and West. I'm a senior associate. FENWICK has been around for about 45 years, one of the first firms in the Valley, and grown to a large technology firm around the world with clients everywhere from 2 people with a PowerPoint in a garage to large publicly traded companies, representing about 1,000 VC-backed startups now, and about 35 very large institutional investors as well. And today I have the pleasure of introducing my good friend, mentor, and colleague, Michael Esquivel. He is one of our fantastic startup partners and head of our digital health practice. I'll look forward to hearing from him and happy to talk to anybody else.
Thanks, Ryan. We love having FENWICK involved as a partner. We're really honored to have Michael on the panel today. But FENWICK, again, for those that aren't familiar, this is a top tier law firm based in Silicon Valley, but with practice all over the country. And as you look to put together an all-star team to grow your startup, having a firm like FENWICK is not just great from an expertise point, but it's a great signal to the market that you've got the best and brightest around you. So definitely check them out. Okay, next up, Al Guerrero with Silicon Valley Bank. All right, Al, your audio and video should be live. All right, let's see if we can unmute you here.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, welcome, Al.
Technical issues as always. The Zoom challenges are still real. Hi everyone, I'm Al Guerrero, not to be confused with my tocayo, Alejandro Guerrero, who's on the panel. There's like 3 Latinx investors in LA, and of course 2 of them have exactly the same name. I'm a managing director at Silicon Valley Bank in Los Angeles. Let me first start off by telling you a little bit about the bank. SVB is very different than other commercial banks in that we focus exclusively on banking the innovation ecosystem. And that's really reflected in our market share. We bank approximately 50% of all the VCs in the US. 65% of all the VCs and 50% of all the VC-backed companies in the US. And as a passionate supporter of the Latinx founders and investors, I'm proud that SVB is sponsoring this event, and by collaborating and supporting each other, we can make a difference and drive initiatives forward. Case in point is the Diversity Writer Initiative that our panelist Alejandro developed, and I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later. He presented that concept to me and some colleagues at SVB early on and we were able to learn about it and adopt it within 2 weeks. You know, I think that really is something that I'm proud of, and that the bank was able to embrace that initiative so quickly. So my final thoughts is just, let's keep the momentum going. Let's continue to shine light on incredible founders and investors like the folks on this panel, and let's continue to make change.
Al, thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you to SVB and everything that you guys do for the startup community in general, and for the Latinx community. So it's great to have you guys today. Last but not least, Michaela with Reverb. Okay, Michaela, you should be, let's unmute you. All right.
Thank you. I don't know why. There we go. Thank you. Great to be here, and I'm very impressed with your Zoom skills of muting and unmuting each of us as you go. So my name is Michaela. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Reverb. We're based in Seattle, and our goal is helping companies create healthy, inclusive cultures that scale. We basically do that 3 ways. We do that through our HR consulting services, and I'm gonna copy FENWICK, I think, when you said from 2 people in a garage up to the large enterprise companies. We really do specialize in startups and scale-ups. I'd say the most common thing we hear from our clients is, I don't know what I don't know about HR. If that sounds like you, we can help you out. And then we also do customized management and leadership development and one-on-one executive coaching. We're all based in Seattle, but everyone's working virtually. And so we're also taking that opportunity to expand and serve clients outside of Seattle. Inclusion is really dear to us. As you heard me say, it's really a part of our core purpose. And so we're thrilled to sponsor events like these, and we're most aligned with organizations who want to create that inclusive culture, and basically with people who value their talent.
Awesome. Michaela, thanks for joining us today. You know, when I started my last company, as soon as I went out and raised my first $500,000 seed round for it, the first things I did was I hired Early Growth to take care of my finances. I got an HR partner involved. I got a top tier law firm involved. I got a top tier bank involved. And so the group is here today. When we follow up with everyone afterwards, we will share contact information so that you can get in touch with them. But we're very, very appreciative of everything that they do to help us put on these events. Okay, let's get back to, if I can figure out how to do this. Michaela gave me great props for my Zoom skills, and now I'm struggling a little bit to get back to kind of sharing our screen here. But I did want to introduce, let's see, there we go. All right. I did want to let you know that we have a promo running. It's not too early to think about your taxes. They might be not due until April or later if you extend. But getting an expert tax advisor involved before the year end gives you the ability to take some actions that might be able to improve your tax position. And even if you're a startup that's not profitable, there are some things that you can do to get money back from the government. Some of them related to COVID, some of them not, like R&D tax credits. So it's a great time to get your tax house in order before we hit the end of the year, and we do have a promotion running. And so you can find out more about that at earlygrowth.com/tax promo. Okay, we're gonna do 2 quick polls here just so that we understand who's in the audience. This first one is whether you're raising capital or not. And at what stage you're at. And if you're an investor, I've got 2 answers at the bottom for you to be able to answer that as well, so that we get an idea of, of who's in the audience. We're going to take a few seconds here, give everyone a chance to vote. All right, we got votes coming in. All right, we got about half the audience. I'm going to give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. And let's share the results to that so that you all can see who we have in the audience. So we do have an investor group here, and an investor group that is raising a fund, and a good chunk of our audience are raising a seed round. So I'll leave those there for just a second and stop sharing those. And we also had the answers to are you Latinx or not? So about 80% of our audience here is Latinx. And so again, welcome, and let's kick off with the next piece here, which is I want to introduce our moderator, Michael Lilly. Michael, why don't you come off of mute, come join us.
Thanks, Dan. Excited to get started here. I really appreciate it. You know, I don't want to say too much more about early growth, but part of the reason why I haven't left early growth is just we're really big on building community. And that's super, super near and dear to our heart, and especially founders from underrepresented communities as well. And so, you know, kind of the goal with today is really just want to talk about these folks' experiences, and then talk more about just the education about what people should be aware of. And then lastly, you know, really wrap it up with a call to action. And so I don't want to just jump right in and skip over the great folks that we have on the panel here today. So I just wanted to start off with a quick intro of everyone. And so let's kick it off with Michael from FENWICK, just to give your background real quick.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the Early Growth team for having me. My name is Michael Esquivel. I'm a partner in the corporate group at FENWICK and West. I'm a startup lawyer, and really excited to work with entrepreneurs, founders, as they incorporate, grow their companies, and hopefully over time take them public or get sold in a terrific M&A. So really looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate that. Let's go to Daniela.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Real. Real is a platform that automizes savings towards purchases. That way you can buy the things that you want with your own money and without debt. I come from a background in marketing, transitioned to entrepreneurship a couple of years ago, and it's been a very exciting ride. Happy to share it with everybody today.
Wonderful. That's awesome. Excited to have you too. Gadiel, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Well, everybody's heard enough about early growth at this point. I'm the president at the business, and in my role here, I really help assist a lot of our clients as they go through that fundraising process and do a lot of the outreach with potential investors. And so I see the pain firsthand from that perspective. And this is a really important panel, and I'm really excited to just be a part of it and hoping to gain some wisdom along the way myself.
Fantastic. Let's kick it over to Samara.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Samara Mejia Hernandez, and I'm a founding partner of Chingona Ventures. Most of you guys are Latino, but if you don't know what Chingona means, it means badass woman. And I invest in badass founders, including Daniela. She's a portfolio company of mine. She's the definition of a Chingona. The fund was started last year. We've made 15 investments in pre-seed companies where check sizes from 100 to 250,000. We've raised fund 1, and we are super excited to invest all over the United States. My background is an immigrant from Mexico, so I have the immigrant experience to this country, which we'll talk a lot about, I guess. And I also spent nearly a decade at Goldman Sachs and at another venture fund.
Fantastic. Happy to have you too. And last but certainly not least, Alejandro, how about you?
Thanks, Dan, and hi everybody out there, and thanks for having me on the panel. It's great to be here with this awesome group of people. So I'm Alejandro Guerrero. I'm a co-founder and principal at Acton Ventures, an LA-based seed and pre-seed fund. I've been in the startup game for about a dozen years now, 7 years as a founder, 5 years as a VC. My partner and I have raised $55 million over this time frame. Fund 1 of 20 million, a fund 2 of 23, and then about another 12 in SPV follow-ons. All business to business software, and my fund 1 right now is doing some pretty special things. We're running at a 50% net IRR with over $2 billion in aggregated enterprise value just in my top 3 companies alone. So proof that Latin emerging managers can find great companies and support them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Great to have you as well. So yeah, just to dive right in here, because I know we've got a lot to cover here, but I wanted to actually bring it back to Daniela to kick us off here to just kind of describe, you know, the challenges that you faced and this community faces when starting a company, right? What are some of the things you specifically faced as a person from the Latinx community when building a company, when you went through the fundraising process? What did that look like for you? And just to share that with us, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. Look, as entrepreneurs, I think when we decide to actually go and build our business at the beginning, there is a lot of misinformation, right? Like you don't know that you're going to spend so much time fundraising. You don't know that even if you have this idea, this amazing idea, you're going to have to juggle in between bringing your vision to life, but making sure that you're also building a fantastic team, right? So you become the person that is hiring, the person that is reading contracts, the person that is doing Excel sheets, the person that is fundraising. And every single one of those things requires structure as a whole, right? Requires actually you constantly having to step back, look at it holistically, making sure that you're going on the right path, reassess, and keep moving. And I think that's something that has been a fascinating learning as I've built a company, right? Making sure that since the get-go, you surround yourself with the right people, with the investors that it's not only cash investors. When people become part of your cap table, there are people that you're going to have to communicate over time. It's somebody that it's always going to be there as you grow your company. So that's something that we've always been very mindful on. And then from a Latina perspective, right? I mean, we all know the numbers. 80% of the people in this panel are Latinos. So we all know like the allocation of capital, it's smaller for the Latino community. I'm always been a believer in focusing a lot on what I have and not on what I lack. And I think that attitude has allowed me to raise over $4 million for this company, being a first-time founder and a Latina founder on the fintech space, right? So I'm very proud of that, but it's been a lot of openness, asking around. You know, Samara is one of our investors. Alejandro, you know, he invests in different verticals, but it's somebody on the Latinx community that I've picked up the phone and been like, hey, Alejandro, who do you know on these? I saw that you're connected. So it's constantly being open to know who to ask, where to ask. Al Guerrero for SBB have been fantastic since the beginning. So it's a lot of, one of the things that you need to do as a Latino founder is understand that you're going to be required to have even more data than other people that might be pitching the same idea, especially if you don't come from certain circles. When you have certain circles, you know, they are buddies, you know each other, so there are doors that are open. But if you don't, make sure that you're very well prepared, that you know your market, that you know the data, so that when you go out there, you actually have everything to back up what you're saying, and that allows you to have higher chances of being part of that unfortunately small percentage that's getting capital.
And on that front, Daniela, just to jump in, and I think, you know, just I like to just keep the conversations going, so I'm going to chime in and out. But I'm just curious how you first connected or started building those connection blocks into, you know, was it identifying some Latino investors, or was it more of I need to fundraise and I'm expanding my network and starting those building blocks? I'd love to hear your take on that, and then, you know, obviously Alejandro and Samara to jump in and see how they're finding these opportunities with some of these interesting companies.
Yeah, of course. Look, a small percentage of our investment comes actually from the Latin community. Most of the money that we've raised comes from general, let's call it general market, right? So I was never close to specific communities in order to search for capital, right? We have, as founders, we have to see the whole landscape and spectrum. Yes, we have to identify what are the connections that we can leverage, right? Because that helps open doors. But I was never limited to the fact that, hey, I'm Latina, I'm female. There is nobody that looks like me in any fintech conference that I've been to, and someone is standing in a corner, right? I've never thought about that. I always think like I'm a CEO. when I work into a room, I'm not thinking again on what I don't have. I'm thinking on what I have. I'm the CEO of the company. I don't say like, hi, I'm a female. Obviously I am. Hi, I'm Latina. This accent will die for me. I'm originally from Venezuela. And I moved here for college and never left, right? So there are certain things that, but what I did focus on was doing a lot of the research, and that included, to your point with the network, making sure to see, okay, who invested on this space, who was connected to those people. Because I think one thing that is very important for an entrepreneur that it's out there, network is really important. If you wait until you're fundraising in order to start meeting people, then the process is gonna take longer. When you hear that a round has been wrapped up in a couple of weeks, it's not because I just met you for the first time and you wrote me a check, right? Like it's been time that's taken to build those connections, to make sure like, hey, look, this is where we are, this is where our vision is, this is where we're heading. And then a couple of months after, it's like, well, when I met you, we had 0, and now we have users, right? So you keep people engaged, especially at the beginning, because at the beginning when you start, and this is independently on being Latina or not, I think at the beginning, it's the chicken and the egg question, right? You're racing on an idea when you're starting your business, but people want to also see metrics, right? So that's the hard part, because it's like, okay, well, when you have revenue, call me. When I have certain revenue, perhaps, I'm going to be going after a different group of people. So it's very fascinating to manage all of that and open doors. But for me, it was just opening network, and that wasn't necessarily investors. It was from going to events, from meeting other founders that connect with others, right? Even coaches. All of that helped build sort of like this repertoire of connections that then you can tap into as you unlock the next phase of the business.
Alejandro and Samara, do you want to build off that as well?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, Daniela covered a lot, which really translates over to the venture side. I'd say, everything is about building that network early on and you got to go out and meet all the players, right? Get to know who's in your ecosystem, who's investing in what, at what stages. That takes a solid year, I'd say, at least. And then from there, you kind of start figuring out who's my vibe, right? Like, who do I get along with? Who do I think I would want to work with? You're probably going to realize you don't want to work with half the people you met, and that's okay, because different strokes for different folks. So you go out and do that. Then you have to start realizing, okay, well, if we're raising capital for a fund, the institutionals aren't necessarily going to look to be giving it to first-time managers. So how do we go out and meet high net worth individuals? And I think this is kind of where you go back to looking in the mirror and telling yourself, what are my strengths, right? If you're Latino or Latino, go hit that network hard. Go hit up folks that are like you, coming from similar communities. Tap into your college network. I mean, there's part of what was so fascinating to me as we were going out to raise capital in our funds was just how often I found myself basically educating really smart people who had way more degrees than I did about the mechanics of venture capital. And what showed to me is that this asset class is incredibly elusive, even if you went to Harvard or Stanford, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you really understand what's going on in the world of venture capital. So, going out building genuine relationships is really key, because people want to get to know you. Communicate often, let them know how you're doing. There's a delicate balance to all of that, but people want to see that you're actually going to be invested in them, and you're not just going to try to come by and use them. Nobody wants to feel used. It is about building credible relationships.
Got it.
Yeah, I think I was going to say everyone's kind of said a lot of great things. I would just double down on the point that Daniela mentioned about, if you are a Latino founder, there's just not enough Latino venture capitalists or angels right now to get you to the full round. There was one incident in a round I just led in Summa Wealth where 100% of the cap table was all women, 90% were Latinas, which is unheard of. We were very strategic about that. So, and we hope to do more of that going forward. And many of you guys know Beatriz, the CEO. But there's just not enough of that. So whenever I advise any founder, it's like, look at the capital available. And yes, I might connect immediately with Alejandro or somebody else, but figure out a way to position your business for first for growth for yourself, but figure out what investors are going to click with you and which ones are not. And the more you do it, the more you're going to realize it within the first few minutes of whether it's going to work or not. And that's also from a fun perspective, to Alejandro's point. So I would just double down on, because that's what I advise. And I know we're going to talk about geography as well, but even in the Midwest versus the coast, I always say, look all over the country, not just in your area. Maybe in San Francisco, you may be able to close the full round there, but definitely not in Chicago or anywhere in the Midwest. So I always advise to go outside of your geography.
Just to switch gears on that point too about not enough funding, but there was some good news recently too, Samara, where PayPal came in, spread $50 million amongst 8 funds, including yours as well. So can we talk a little bit about like what success would look like from like a corporate venture capital arm and just the interest in the community as well, and what should be done to grow that over time?
Yeah, first of all, I'm extremely grateful for the PayPal team and their commitment to Chingona Ventures. That was incredible. It literally spearheaded our Fund 2 fundraise. They're one of the few firms that not only makes an announcement, but also invests and sends the wire, right? Send the wire, make the hire. That's what we're here for. And that's what they're talking the talk, they're walking the walk. So I'm very grateful for that. But you are starting to see more corporate VCs have initial conversations. Maybe they're not as public, which is totally fine. They've definitely reached out to say, okay, does this make sense? Should we be investing in funds? And one of the things that PayPal did was like, hey, we do direct investments, but we do Series A or above. We have a certain network here. We are not in the early stage. That's not our bread and butter. And it's hard when you're a later stage VC or when you've been focusing on only a specific sector to automatically just hire a team and then go and find it. You can do that, but it takes time. So why not invest with the fund managers that already have the network, that have already made the investments, invest in them, and then hopefully add value in many other ways, right? So downstream deal flow, you bet that, Daniela hopefully will talk to them in their Series A when she gets there, right? For bigger checks, for connections to other LPs, for connections to other founders. So I think there's a lot of talk, which is really good based on very unfortunate incidents this past summer. But it's still to be determined how many people are going to be sending the hire or making the hire, sending the wire. That's still TBD, but PayPal is absolutely one of them. And I'm so excited to be partnering with them.
Fantastic. Michael, my apologies. I jumped in a little too quick. My mute button's on delay, I think. So wanted to pop it back over to you. I know you wanted to chime in as well.
Yeah, no worries, Michael. I didn't want to cut you off either. I wanted to just make two observations that I've seen, having had the privilege of working with hundreds of startups over my, 20+ year career. One is to the comment earlier, getting out and meeting venture investors and seed investors is critical. I always like to say, you've got to date before you get engaged, and you've got to get engaged before you get married. And when you bring on an investor onto your cap table, you're getting married to that individual and that fund. And I think, not only to develop relationships, but these are the folks that are going to be there with you, hopefully through thick and thin. And so I think that was, just one broad observation, I wanted to share with folks in terms of how to think about partnering with these venture investors. Anyway, back over to you, Michael.
It's been interesting. Sorry, Daniela. Yeah, I just wanted to, in part of the comment on building the network, this is what I also see a lot with a lot of startup founders is, the network effect of meeting other founders, meeting investors, getting introduced to other investors via, other companies and their current investors. So it really is that network effect. I think in the last, 9 months or so, that's been more challenging, right? Because a lot of us have been, with COVID impacting everything, we're not able to go out to as many events. And so what I started to see a little bit more are these communities starting to pop up of founders, whether it's, they've got a Latinx focus or just startup founders. So I think finding those groups, I think, can be additive and helpful. I've also, and maybe this has just been my experience, just there's been a little bit more of an openness on whether it's accepting connections on LinkedIn, having a 15-minute conversation. But I think it's balancing a little bit of that as you're doing your outreach or really trying to figure out, how to build out your fundraising plan.
Yeah, that's interesting. Gadi, I just wanted, the other observation dovetails right off of that. When startup CEOs ask me, how I observe the time allocation of their efforts, I got to say, 1/3 of startup CEOs' times in my experience is spent fundraising. 1/3 of their time is spent recruiting, and 1/3 is actually spent focusing on executing on the business. And so I do think getting out there and being proactive, networking, trying to reach out to folks. And look, when a recent survey by Rock Health was conducted, they noted that, when they asked Latinx founders what was the biggest barrier, it was access to capital. And in order to overcome that, we've just got to work harder, double down, and really, really probe the network, the extended network, reach out to folks. You'd be amazed that even a cold email or a cold outreach can oftentimes lead to a very successful opportunity.
And building on that, Michael, it's a little bit of a volumes game, especially at the beginning, right? And that's something that all founders should be mindful of. If you think that you're gonna pitch 20 people and you're gonna get $1 million, well, amazing for you if you can, all power to you. But that's not the reality, right? And so it's very much understanding that it's a volume game, that you need to be organized on that volume game and how you're gonna play it, because there are so many players out there. Right? There is money out there. Perhaps you're gonna have to hit double, triple the people that others, but that doesn't mean that you can't, right? You just have to organize yourself so that you do that. And then recently that asked me a little bit, it's like self-limitation. Never self-limit yourself. Never think that, hey, because I'm Latina, I'm not gonna be able to ever raise, because then you're gonna be your biggest enemy since the get-go, right? Like, don't think, because I've heard people saying like, yeah, no, I'm not even gonna try to fundraise because I'm Latin or because I'm a woman. Like, how do you know that you're not gonna be able to get that money if you're not even trying, right? Like, starting your own company is already something that very few people do. So props to everybody that started their own company, because it's huge. It's a huge movement. It's huge risk. It's huge vulnerability, putting your idea out there. So going on and actually like limiting yourself, and it's not worth it. Just try it. What's the worst thing that can happen? That somebody tells you no? And in a lot of cases, there is a lot of learning. Like, the other thing is that as a founder, never take feedback personally, right? They're talking about your company and perhaps they don't understand the problem because it's not their problem, right? And based on what you're building. So be mindful of just like asking, hey, okay, this might not be for you, but why? Because that's going to help you build the story after. And we're going to have to be building the story, because even after you close a round, the next round then comes, right? Like, the more that you grow, the more that your company grow, the more capital, depending on the structure of your company, you are going to need in the future, right? Depending on how you structure it. So don't think that, okay, yeah, whatever, I'm never going to see you again. It's a very small community, even if it feels very big. And just be mindful of all of that, and just be your biggest fan and pump yourself up constantly, because that's how you get out there.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. On that fundraising note too, I wanted to go over to Alejandro too, and the diversity rider, and talk a little bit about your efforts there as well. That'd be great.
Yeah. So over the summer, when George Floyd got murdered, I went through a really terrible grieving process. For me, it was a moment of reflection, looking back on my life as a first generation Mexican American. My mom dropped out of school 6th grade, my dad 7th grade, grew up super poor. Nobody told me what to do, where to go, or anything. Just kind of been figure it out, put my hand on the stove and hope that I don't get burned again. A series of hard work, but also luck and timing. People who opened doors for me when I didn't even know there was a door to be opened. All of that is there. So it was kind of like a big lead up, spending my 7 years as a founder, getting my face beaten, and everything else that went with that you know, when I got offered the opportunity to build a fund with my partner, it was different. And, you know, he's 20 years my elder, you know, 3-time founder, took his store company public, ran it as a public company CEO for 10 years. I'm lucky, right? I'm blessed that I have a mentor and a partner that balances me out in terms of what I know, what he knows, and kind of what we bring to the table. So when we went out to raise, it made the process a little bit more manageable because it was harder than anything I had done than when I was a founder, like without a doubt. Raising capital as a fund manager is significantly harder. And that's because this game is basically built for the privileged and the wealthy. And if you don't come into the game with some level of privilege and some level of wealth, it's hard to kind of get your footing. So we were lucky that we raised the money, but you know, there was no desire to invest in emerging managers, or I should say diverse managers, when we were out raising Fund 1 and even Fund 2. You know, we went out to talk to, this is again pre the events of the summer, we went out to talk to folks who were, you know, saying that they were, you know, publicly about like emerging managers that were diverse. And then when we met them, it was like, yeah, that's not at all the case. So when he got murdered, I went through the grieving process. I was sitting in my room, my living room, crying, you know, and the idea just hit me, you know, how do we do something that will have no endpoint? Because I figured people are going to come out of the woodwork and they're going to want to do programs and they're going to want to do incredible things, which is great. But diversity isn't going to be solved by a cohort or a program. It's going to take years, probably our lifetime, to solve this. And so how do we create something that has no endpoint? And for me, that was term sheets. Whether you're a really big fund, small fund, I don't care what AUM you have. If you want to invest in a company, you're going to give a term sheet. And in order to have a term sheet be presented, there's just a certain set of questions you need to ask as part of a conversation. So along the lines of how much money do you want to raise, at what price? We should be talking about, cool, what diverse investors that are not currently present, if I lead you around, should we be targeting to bring in as a co-investor, not because it's charity, but because all the data clearly shows that having diverse teams will outperform. And when they're invested on your cap table, they're not just going to have a cup of coffee with you and forget about you 15 minutes later, which is what happens when people are not invested. When they're on the cap table, they are there because they now have an incentive, right? They have a stake in the outcome of your company. So I'm going to pay attention to you for the next 8 years. You know, it's going to ebb and flow depending on where you are and where your investors are in time, but you know that they're going to be there. So, you know, luckily I was able to go out and talk to some mentors who heard my idea, helped me, you know, hash it out. And I talked to a lot of folks, many people who ghosted me, many people who answered me once, didn't come back, but we got a core group of 10 together, including First Round Capital and Graycroft and Maveron. And we presented it and we went out. And since then it's gotten incredibly well received. We're at almost, you know, 34, 35 firms now that have signed on. And in addition to that, founders have also felt the need to, well, they've felt the impact of it. And particularly, you know, one of my founders, Richie Stern at Phoenix Payments, took it to heart. And, you know, he just had a Series B extension that was led recently by Lightspeed Ventures. And candidly, what he did is he told them, I'm going to withhold $3 million. I'm not going to let you take it. I'm going to create an SPV and I'm going to go try to get Latinx and Black investors to invest in my company. Because building a track record, being invested in a company that's doing well, that's being, you know, invested by a top tier fund that's the signal that people who are looking to invest in emerging managers, that's what they like to see. The splashy names of, you know, did the Sequoias invest? Did the Ford Foundation invest as an LP? Okay, those are the signals that I want to see. And, you know, he ran this process, and this is not public yet, but 80 people ended up investing. 80 individual investors and a pretty even 50-50 split between Black and Latinx. So just an incredible movement and something that Richie took to heart. So I'm hopeful, right? Like these are the kinds of things that are now happening. And I'm just glad that, you know, this little idea that came to my mind and, you know, was able to come to fruition, and that there's a lot of folks out there doing stuff, but it's just about helping others out. You know, I'm finding a level of success that I'm grateful for, but I want to see other people here too. There's a lot of room for all of us to grow.
What other things or resources should we be thinking about as well? I mean, I know, Michael, you touched on a little bit earlier too with the Rock Health report, but you know, the gap in the middle of the country too for Latinx founders. Like, can you talk a little bit about how you look to bridge that as well, and how you're helping that community too?
You know, I'll go first, Michael. Yeah, you know, it really is one of the best things we can do to help each other is open up our respective networks, right? And so what I do with the founders, whether they're clients or not who reach out, is I'm always happy to try to connect and introduce folks. I spend a big part of the differentiator I think someone like myself can add is investing in the partnerships with a lot of these terrific investors, be they angels, super angels, seed investors, and obviously, as Alejandro just noted, some of the terrific top tier funds. And you're absolutely right. I mean, looking at the data, it's staggering. But you know, the West and the Northeast are where a lot of the venture dollars, the overwhelming, if you look in that Rock Health report, it's just one data point, and it's only one. But overwhelmingly, the capital is being invested on the coast and in the South and Midwest, where you find a lot of Latinx and African American founders. There's just less dollars getting deployed there. And so when, as I noted earlier, you hear that, you know, Hispanic and Latinx founders are responding, hey, access to capital is the biggest barrier to success for my startup. You know, one of the things I think is it's a call to action for venture investors at all stages of the life cycle to not only support investors of color, as Alejandro's diversity writer I think rightfully calls out, but really just, you know, to rethink the sourcing, to tap into new communities, to look into the South and Midwest where a lot of these, you know, entrepreneurs of color are starting their companies, and to realize that we all have to stay humble and keep learning. And I think there's an opportunity for us and for the investors to really, you know, tap into these unique sources and see great companies being formed. So from my perspective, again, it's like, how can I help open up? How can I deploy my network? How can we help each other? Because it's you know, we're the single largest as a group, you know, growing ethnic group in this country, and our startups are starting to reflect that, and we therefore need to, you know, all of us who are in unique positions, the investors on this panel, you know, the folks at Early Growth, like, let's open up our networks to help each other.
Yeah, it's so much more than what's the actual service you provide, more about what's the value you can actually deliver on, right? So I think that's super important.
Well,
Samar, do you have anything to add to that as well?
Yeah, it's just crazy to me how we're the fastest growing demographic in the United States with the highest purchasing power. 1 out of every 4 kids born in the United States is Latino. Like I can't understand why VC investors continue to overlook this opportunity. I mean, it's great for me because I get to invest in this, but it's just, I just don't get it. But in terms of the question around the resources, you know, we are aggressively trying to build those resources with many organizations. So Latinx VC, I co-founded a Latinx Founders Collective thing. We're kind of all doing something around, you know, different parts of the country. I think, you know, the challenge is that, as we saw through the election and some other things, Latinos are very different. Right? Latinos international are very different than US born Latinos. We are not all poor, we're not all immigrant, although that is my background as well. Some of us speak only English, some of us speak only Spanish, some of us speak Spanglish, as my son does, right? So like we're all so different. And I'm actually writing an article about this just on how to think about it, because to the point earlier, people want to invest in this community, they just don't know how, they don't know how to find them. People ask me constantly, do you have lists? I'm like, well, what's a list going to do? I mean, I keep track of all the Latino founders that come to me. I keep track of all the Latino investors that I work with. I keep track of all the Latinos that want to get jobs into VC. And I think that there's other lists, but like, what are we going to do with these lists? Are we actually going to be intentional about it? Are we actually going to start tracking it, right? That's the big thing I'm like, if you are just start tracking who's coming through the door. I've been doing that for 6 years, right? Then you start to understand, okay, if I do an event like this, do I get 20% more inbound of diverse founders? If I do office hours, do I get more? And the first thing is getting it through the door, but the next step is getting it through the investment process and actually making an investment. So I think we're the resources, you know, for founders, there's a lot of stuff on books and term sheets and office hours and all and lists, but you know, what the next step is, I think we have to take it to the next step, is stuff like what Alejandro's doing with the Diversity Writers Initiative, with founders that don't have any diversity on the cap table. I'm about to invest in an all white male straight white male team. And people are like, what? That's not your thesis. That's not what you do. But they sought me out because like, we need a diverse perspective. We're product guys. My whole background is sales, right? We need to hire our first woman. We can't, it's at the forefront of every board meeting. So we've done a little bit, and there's lists and there's books and there's whatever else, but we got to take it to that next step. And what is that next step? It is being intentional about it, is measuring those results. It's actually making these investments. And if you're not making investments, then how do we think about the networks that we have, what hires we have on the team, how we're promoting the team. And then ultimately, which is my ultimate goal with Chingona Ventures and for my LPs and for my founders, is this wealth creation, right? We need to change the way we think about wealth in our community and close the wealth gap. And that happens through founding companies, that happens through equity ownership, that happens through investing in these founders and these opportunities. So that's kind of answers your question, but I just wanted to throw on the passionate part about it, about taking it a step further beyond this.
And you know, I wanted to follow up a little bit on that. Is it's got to be incredibly hard from, you know, Samara, you and Alejandro, because there's what it feels like, and I'd love to get your insight on this too, is just it's a small community when we're thinking about the investors that are, you know, Latino or, you know, people of color, and it's not as diverse quite yet. Do you get the sense that more people are standing up, and because you're only kind of like two folks, right? And, you know, you still need to sleep every day, and, you know, Samara, you got to raise your kid. And so I think it's hard. And sometimes I do coach my founders where I say, hey, you know, just, you got to be conscious of everybody else's time too, right? Because we want to help everybody, we want to be supportive of the community, but there's only so many hours in the day. So I guess part of my question is like, how do you balance that? And then what's the, you know, do you get the feeling and sense that more people are committing their own time to say, hey, let's, you know, let's raise this tide?
You were cutting off a bit on my end, but I think what you were asking is just kind of like, how do you balance the time of helping others out versus kind of the day-to-day? Is that it? Look, from a fund manager perspective, your number one job is to return capital to your LPs. That's first and foremost, is to make money for your investors. So I look at everything through that lens. But because I am diverse, because I have a network that's diverse, I'm not struggling to find diverse deal flow because I took the time to build that in. So, you know, Fund 1 was about, first of all, we had a target of 20 million. We didn't know if we were going to land at 2, at 5, or 10, or whatever. So you don't really kind of know what you're going to have until you get close to the end. And so just being laser focused, right? Making sure whatever the big task at hand is, you go out and accomplish that first. Then you kind of work through what you got to do next, which is, all right, we got to be finding founders, investing in them, and supporting them. So to me, I look at it through that lens, right? Making sure that my partner and I are safe, making sure that we're always thinking about things from a perspective of, are we making the right investments for, you know, at least every company that we're investing in, ideally being able to return the fund, and supporting founders. And then from there, it's a balancing act, because you do want to be helpful to the community. You do want to make sure you spend some of your time sharing the knowledge. But there's a give and take on that. So I think you just have to be cognizant where you are and what part of you sort of the business chain, right? When I'm out fundraising, I'm not doing panels. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm laser focused. It's the same way that I recommend to founders. It's like, you know, when you raise a seed round, I tell my founders, congratulations, you know, you survived the Hunger Games. Now welcome to the Game of Thrones. It only gets harder from here. It's not time to go around and talking to the whole planet about how you raise the seed round. You want to do some of that, but the next stage of investors are measuring your success by how many panels you do. They're measuring by how many customers and how much revenue you got in the door. So always be laser focused, because for us, Latinos and Latinas, we're just judged differently, right? There's not a lot of folks that look like us, that are understanding us, that are going to be able to invest in us. And so our shots on goal are a bit more limited, which means you got to be working harder, because it takes you 10 times the effort to get to the same place, and it takes one mistake to fall back down to the floor. I've learned that the hard way, that when you bifurcate your time at the wrong places, you know, you could end up, you know, hurting yourself in the long haul. So there's a delicate act.
I just want to add that being one of the few or the first or whatever, you get asked to do a ton of this stuff, and you grew up somebody helped you get there, and so you just feel like you need to help others. And I get a ton of Latinas reach out to me about getting into VC, and I get a ton of Latinos also reaching out to me about their business. And I'm like, I need to return capital, and not only that, return it, I need to grow it. And it's so hard because when I was in that state, I remember reaching out to this Latina VC, and I was just like, you're a free lunch school kid, I'm a free lunch school kid, like, we're gonna connect. And she never responded back to me. I was like, what the heck? And then now I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally understand. You were trying to grow your business, right? And so it's hard because many of us, I have this conversation all the time with my friends, that we get asked to do this stuff all the time, and people don't realize that we're still trying to grow our business. And like Alejandro said, there's a lot of pressure. Like my fund is Chingona Ventures. If I don't raise fund 2, if I don't make returns, like that's gonna look really bad, being Chingona Ventures. But how I think about it is I need to be okay saying no. And what I've started to do is, if people say to me, I had like 10, not 10, maybe 8 Latinas reach out to me in the last 2 weeks to get into VC. And so the last one, I would just go, look, I can't do it all. Why don't you set up a fireside chat? We'll pick a date in December, and anybody that wants to do it, reach out, and then we're going to do a 1-hour session, ask me anything, and then we'll do that, right? So I'm trying to find ways, but your first thing, you're only going to help our community grow if you grow your business yourself and you get returns, and you're going to be able to make a much bigger impact than the one panel that we're doing today, although this panel is super important. But being strategic about that and help, and anything you do is helping your business grow.
Absolutely. So just on that note too, what's the one thing we can do as leaders to help grow this community? And what's the one thing that the audience should do too, to really help?
Support each other. I mean, I can't tell you how important that is. When you see a fellow Latino or Latina raise a significant round, reach out to them, tell them congratulations. If you see a fund manager have a nice markup in their portfolio, reach out to them. Tell them congratulations. These little things, they matter, because it's hard, right? Like, we're isolated even more so now than ever, because we're all locked in our homes and can't go out and hug people and do all the things that bring us joy. So, it's hard enough building a company. Then you layer on, the fact that, very few dollars rolling into Latino and Latina managers. There's only 1% of us represented in the industry. The same thing is with founders. That it's harder, right? So when someone finds a level of success, support them. That I see that a lot in the Black community. I see that a lot, obviously, in the Jewish community, and that's fantastic, right? That's why their communities are so strong. That's why they're so successful, because they've been able to figure out how to constantly do that at all times. So yeah, we all want to be at the top. We're all striving to get there. But I feel like, personally, I felt for a long time, this has been like a crab in a bucket kind of thing, community, right? Where we're, instead of realizing that we can support each other to get out, we're pulling each other down. So, just think about it from that conscious perspective, because we're all going through an incredible battle trying to build these companies and raise these funds, and just little things like supporting each other truly goes a long way.
Anyone else comments on that?
Totally agree with Alejandro, right? Supporting each other, following each other's, brands, Instagram, posting about other founders. I've started to do that a lot. The few things that I buy now, I make sure that if it can be from a founder that I know, another, even Latinx, or anybody that I know that is trying to grow their own business, that's where my money is gonna go, right? Share it, leave a comment, post it, share it with your friends. You don't need to necessarily feel that you need to spend the dollars, but at least put the word out there, because that support goes a long way. And I have high respect from the Jewish community. I'm not Jewish, but I always say that if Latinos were like Jewish, we would rule the world, right? They support each other, and that's how they managed to do everything that they've managed to do. And I feel like Latinos, we lack that. I think we're also so focused that we have struggle to get here. Then when we get here, it's like the constant fight. It's like, if we see each other, if we support each other in one way or another, then we can be stronger and things can ripple faster.
Can I chime in? I wanted to just jump back in on what Daniela said and add on that, because it's right. I believe I was, a lot of us, right? We're conditioned to think that there isn't room for us. And that's just absolute horseshit. right? The reason why we don't think that is because when you go into an event in the tech world, you're probably the only person of color in the room, or maybe there's like one other. So you start to think, oh, well, this game isn't made for me, so there's no representation. So that means that only one or two of us can get in. So that means I'm going to be extra competitive, which is already part of what this capitalism game is. But you're like ready to start cutting at each other's throats instead of supporting each other and being helpful with knowledge and information and deals. That's like a total wrong way to think about it. And I was a little guilty of that myself. It really, the events of the summer, with George Floyd changed me tremendously. It wasn't that any of this stuff wasn't new to me. It wasn't, but it came out in a different way where I said, I'm done, I'm done staying silent. I'm done, whatever. I've earned the right to be able to say what I'm going to say because I've done it, right? This isn't me just like making stuff up. Here's a track record. Here's the experiences that we've done. And so how do we start supporting each other out? But don't believe it, right? Like, yeah, there's not a lot of us right now because the people who control the dollars are not diverse. So it's going to take a lot of effort of us to constantly keep pushing the needle and not letting up. And that, I believe, is going to be one of the key things that'll help us change. Right? It's just that mentality. There's a lot of room to grow. There's a lot of money to be made. Like Samara pointed out earlier, there's just so many Latino opportunities that are being overlooked because there's nobody paying attention. So, don't buy into this whole notion that we all can make it. We absolutely all can make it, and you got to believe that.
Awesome, Alejandro. That was great. Michael, Gadiel, and Samara, any final words for us here? I know we're coming up towards the end of this, but this has been wonderful so far. I've really enjoyed it.
Just, support each other. I mean, that's I think the underlying theme. And, listening to everybody else, I know I could do more, and I plan on doing more. So that's kind of the message here.
Yeah, many times people think that you have to do something really, really big to make an impact, and you don't necessarily need to, right? Whenever I used to host dinners for the Latino Founders Collective, we used to go around the room and introduce ourselves and say, have an ask and a give. What can I give to somebody? Introductions to investors, help with the deck. What's my ask? And the goal was to have at least one person have something happen to one other person there. And out of that, we got actually investments in companies. And so when I think about that, I can't be everywhere with anybody, but I have gotten 2 Latinas out of these, chats that have gotten them jobs in venture capital. I have made investments in other Latinas and Latinos. I have angels behind me that I don't know who they are, but they're making connections to LPs. One of them was PayPal, who made the investment. So, it is about helping the community. But if you just think about even a small action and all of us doing it, all of the millions of Latinos that are growing in the United States doing it for each other, it's going to be a huge impact.
Yeah, I would just close with don't give up. It's hard. If this was easy, everybody would do it. But if you keep trying, you're going to meet a lot of investors. You're going to meet a lot of folks that are going to say no, as Daniela said. But in the end, it only takes one. And I can't tell you how many great companies in Silicon Valley, were in shoes where they only got one term sheet, and they were able to capitalize on that and rocket ship launch their company. So please don't give up. We're here to help, and know that it's going to be a hard journey, but one well worth it.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to say is, high respect for everybody that's in this panel, Alejandro, Samara, Michael, everybody, Gadiel, because as we're working towards building our companies, this is this huge movement of see it, be it, right? As they come up with higher returns for their LPs, then they're representing Latinos, right? They're showing the voice. As my company keeps growing and we keep raising, I'm a Latina that it's, raising more and more, growing, building a team. So all of that, one way or another, even if I'm not spending time one-on-one with everybody that pins me, being like, hey, how did you fundraise? I'm also working hard. And as I progress, or every single one of these people here progress, see yourself in that progression and know that we're all working for our own success, but our success also means the success of the community as a whole, because nobody wants to be like the small 1% that doesn't get capital, right? We're fighting against that every day from an LP perspective, investor perspective, every perspective that you see.
That was perfect way to end, Daniela. Thank you so much. That was great. And thanks to the rest of you. This was an awesome panel. So fortunate enough to be a part of it. And with that, Dan, do you want to close us out here?
Sure. Just want to share my thanks as well for sharing your knowledge and your passion, and to echo something that Alex said, this is not an endpoint. This is a journey that we're on for making improvement. It's not an endpoint for early growth either. We've got another webinar coming up. The next one will be posted. It's December 9th. And it's our monthly installment of Meet the VC. So hopefully everyone will join us for that. Thank you for attending. Thanks again to our panelists. The video will be up on our YouTube channel tomorrow. And everyone have a great day and a great week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.